I think it's got some benefits to it. I won't do that. I'll skip that. But you know what? God fashioned and formed and made me. And I could look at other people and I could say, boy, I wish if I could do what they could, if I had that. If I had that look, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and change it. Can any of us, by our own thought, add a cubit to our stature? Jesus tells us that. Don't worry, just give it a few years, you're going to lose that height, right? I was talking to my older people. I used to be so tall. I'm going to ask you, Christian, are you content with the way God made you? I'm not saying it's sin, but I'm asking, would you ask God if it is? Is it wrong for you and I to go to God and we say, God, I don't like this that you've made about me, so I am going to change it. I'm going to change the color because I want it my way. Can maturity in a Christian stop and say, wait a minute, I want to be content with the way God made me? In this world in which we live, so many are convinced that the only thing that brings contentment is if everything is the way they want it. But they miss what God has provided for them. Can we look at the children of Israel in the Old Testament? We want a king. We want to be like everybody other nation. We want to be just like them. And when they got what they asked for, you know what they missed? What they needed. They no longer had a theocracy. They had a monarchy. And God told the prophet, he says, listen, the king is going to come in, he's going to take their men and women, he's going to put them as soldiers and as farmers and as confectionaries to cook for him and his banquets. They're going to take of the resources from the land. The king is going to, I have none of that, God says. But when they were discontented with what God had for them, they moved to lose everything that they needed because they got what they wanted. Contentment doesn't come in getting something beyond that. Would you agree with me? Contentment does not come with trying to gain something beyond what God has provided. And yet, how many of us as American Christians are discontented with what God is providing? I'm not saying displeased. There are things that you and I can say, but you know what, if this opportunity came, maybe I'm looking at things that God has provided. Not just my appearance, but the things. I already hit this a little bit, but discontented with all that God has given. This is, I don't like this. I need more. Remember the story of Job? God says to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? And Satan says, well, yeah, it's God's because you give him everything. God said, no, he's a just man. Tell you what, Satan, you can take everything from him, just don't touch his body. And we find at the end of Job chapter 1 that Job, when he's sitting there, when all that he has is taken away in an instant, I say in an instant, one servant right after another. Your flocks are gone. Your herds are gone. Your wealth is gone. Your children are gone. And Job sits there and he says, wait a minute. When I entered this world, I'm going to paraphrase this. When I entered this world, I didn't even have clothes. And when I leave this world, I'm not taking a stitch of clothes with me. Naked, he says it this way, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked am I going to return thither. The Lord gave, and what? The Lord took away. Then he says this, blessed be the name of the Lord. Are you contented with what God is providing for you? Well, I've got to gather more. I need to build a bigger barn, the foolish man says. I'm not talking about not planning for the future and not providing for your children, for your grandchildren. A just man leaves an inheritance onto his children's children. I'm talking about contentment. Paul, when he's trying to help Timothy both understand life and how to minister to the people that Timothy is ministering to. Paul has left him as a pastor at different places to straighten out the church. And Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 6, he says this, but she that liveth in pleasure is dead while she liveth. The person who's living, desiring more and desiring this and that. Now, I don't know about you, but have you ever seen somebody try to carry more things than they can carry? It's almost humorous. Because as they're carrying, maybe this is you, and this is just illustration's sake, all right? I'm not saying this is wrong, but you've gone to the grocery store, you've spent your 3 weeks' paycheck to eat for 1 week. I get it. You got there, and because you did that, you've got more than you can carry in one load. But we have this idea that I can carry just a few more bags. So we take those plastic bags that literally you can only put one thing in because they're so thin, right? And you put one on each finger, and you're holding all these bags there. And then I still have the hand. I can put something in, and you take a step, and one of those bags goes. And you think to yourself, well, I can reach down and I can grab that between my thumb and my that can of soup, right? And you grab that, and you're walking, and another thing falls, and it's almost humorous because you've left this whole trail of items all the way to your kitchen dining room table or counter, wherever you put it down. And you think, boy, and you look back and half of the things you tried to carry are gone. You know what happens when you're living trying to gather things to yourself? You're like who God says you've got this broken cistern that you're carrying around, and you keep dumping everything you can in to fill the cistern up, but you don't realize there's a hole in the bottom and it's all just running out. And when you live with discontentment, you're living and saying, I need more. I had a friend in high school who said, I believe God's called me to preach. But he said, that's you and I know. This was in high school. He said, that doesn't pay well. He said, I think I'm going to go be a lawyer. And he spent his life. He said, I know what most people who go that route, I know where they end up. I'm not going to go to alcohol. I'm not going to go to any of those things. I'm going to stay. But this is what I want. I know what God's told me to do, but I'm going to go do my thing. A couple years later, he's divorced. And today, he's already in eternity. God had a plan, had a perfect plan for his life, but he said, I'm not going that way. I want my own thing. I'm discontent with what God has called me to do. I'm not satisfied. I don't want that. I want my own thing. Let me read. You don't need to turn here, but 1 Corinthians chapter 1. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Very quickly, I could read more, but just a few verses. Verse number 24. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 24, down through the end of the chapter. But unto them which are called, both Jew and Greek, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God, became the foolishness of God, because the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For ye see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God hath chosen the foolish things of this world to confound the wise, and God hath chosen the weak things of this world to confound the things which are mighty, and the base things of the world, and the things which are despised hath God chosen, yea, the things which are not, to bring to naught the things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence. But of him are ye in Christ Jesus, who of God is made unto us wisdom and righteousness and satisfaction and redemption, that according as is written, he that glorieth, let him glory in this. Do you know why we are discontent? Because we want the glory. Samson, where does your great strength lie? In my beautiful locks of hair. Is that where it lied? It was when God's Spirit came upon him. And the removal of the locks of his hair was just showing that he wasn't obedient to God. I don't think Samson was a strong man. Because then the people would have said, I know where his strength is. They said, where in the world does this little runt of a Jewish guy, how in the world can he carry the gates of the city? It was because he had God's strength. And you know what? God has a plan for your life and my life. Amy, very sickly growing up. She had learned to accept that God had given her brown eyes. She came out one day and said, God's called me to be a missionary. And the people looked at her and said, no, Amy. No, Amy. That's not God's call in your life. She went to Japan. And before she even learned the language, she was brought her interpreter with, and she's there working with the Japanese and trying to win them to Christ. And she was so pious that she wore her English clothes. And she walked in and talked to this Japanese lady who was about to pass. And she was wearing some fur gloves or cat. I'm going to be content. So she started wearing the Japanese clothes, and she said, I'm going to look like a Japanese. Though she still struggled. Girls who were taken into the temple and were doing the work of temple work, which involved unrighteous practices with the priests. And Amy wasn't able to find out what was going on and how she could help. But she realized if she dressed as an Indian and she dyed her skin with coffee, that her brown eyes didn't give away her identity. And she walked into the temple and she rescued some young ladies out of the temple. And in the end, she realized that God had given her brown eyes because his plan was best. I want to ask you this, Christian. In this series of respectable sins that we say, maybe I could just call them hidden sins. Are you content? There's a song we sing sometimes. Jesus is all the world to me. Is he? Is he, Christian? Or is it that neighbor's intellect or that neighbor's toy or that neighbor's job or that neighbor's spouse? None of that is going to give you any satisfaction. You see, because when our circumstances are accepted, discontentment disappears. And when discontentment is gone, then and only then can we bring God glory. This is the way God made me, and I thank him for it. But you know what the interesting thing happens is you move from an attitude of being a victim to an attitude of being a servant, a steward. Why did God give Amy brown eyes rather than blue eyes? Not because he hated her, not because he was punishing her, but he said, I have a perfect plan, and you are to submit your body, a living sacrifice, for that plan. Would you bow your head and close your eyes? Maybe none of these things that I mentioned, maybe that's not what you're discontent with. But can you let God's Spirit lay his heavy hand in your life and say, this is where you're discontented? You're dissatisfied with the family God has put you in, or the spouse God has given you. You're displeased